Hello ladies and gentlemen, Ollie here and welcome back to another video in the Q&A series here on this channel. And this one is something that I get asked a lot. As you would imagine, it's a very common question. Is graduate entry medicine harder than studying at undergrad degree level? So I come from a science background obviously, so I think the question is, what's the difficulty like in terms of the kind of intellectual challenge going from undergrad level to studying an accelerated medical program? Now I can't actually remember whether I mentioned this in my video that I made about my own concerns before I started medical school. I recommend going and watching that video. I labelled some particular things that I was a bit kind of scared of, for want of a better phrase. But I think it's important for this question just to give it the preface that I studied a science degree at university. I studied cellular and molecular biology at Newcastle University, and that degree covered a range of topics, but chiefly things like genetics, biochemistry, biotechnology, cell biology, that kind of thing. And I think that's important because particularly for places like Warwick, they accept people from humanities backgrounds as well as from sciences. So my answer, I think, will apply fairly well to anybody doing biology, biomedical sciences, biochemistry, a topic like that where it's similar enough, but it won't represent very well people who come from a different kind of background like classics or law or something like that. And somewhat bizarrely, I don't know how many of you would expect to hear this from me, but in terms of the actual content, in terms of the intellectual challenge in understanding the content, I'm finding medical school actually easier so far than some of the topics in my undergrad degree. And this is particularly true because of the relative depth that we study in. So before, I was used to studying things like biochemical pathways and protein cascades, things like that. A lot of abstract information that doesn't really mean anything, a lot of long words and labels and things that you just had to remember in big long sequences and lists. Whereas here at medical school, so far we're studying things at a much more basic level. However, obviously there has to be a trade-off somewhere, and in medicine this seems to be counterbalanced by the enormous breadth that we're learning topics in. So just to clarify that one more time, you study in far less depth than what I was used to before in my science degree, but far more breadth. And what this has actually meant for me making that transition is that I've had to change my learning style and my approach to learning quite significantly. And in my case, you know, I should probably be more ashamed of this than I am, but I was very much a crammer, and I have a feeling that a lot of you guys are too if you're in the same situation as me. So before an exam, I wouldn't study very hard, to be honest, most of the time. I would go to the library at midnight the night before my exam and just cram everything I needed to know using flashcards until sitting the exam at 9 AM and then going home afterwards and forgetting everything instantly. And while it's obviously not a good way to learn, I don't think, looking back on it, I did get a first-class degree. When you're working in those kind of narrow focuses, it does work, unfortunately, or at least it will score you a good mark if you do it properly. But when I got here to medical school, it became apparent very, very quickly that that approach was simply not going to work. There's too much you need to know. And I think there are two key elements that play into this change. A lot of the knowledge is isolated, so it's a system that you need to know that doesn't necessarily immediately relate to something else. But then when it comes to actually solving a clinical scenario, you often need understanding of many, many systems that, while at first they might have seemed separate, you actually need to know elements from all of them in order to solve the larger puzzle. So if someone receives an injury to the head, for example, I'm studying the brain and behaviour block at Warwick at the moment. If someone receives a head injury, you need to know the anatomy of the head, you need to know the relevant blood supplies, the things that are going by, the nerves that go down, say, into the arms and legs. That you then need to know the relevant nerves and anatomical structures there to work out what's been affected. What I'm trying to get across is that a lot of different systems can often play into the clinical puzzle, and therefore it's not narrow enough for you to be able to just revise strategically and learn little bits in a lot of depth and hope a question comes up. It's just not going to happen. And like I said before, I'm going to make the wager that actually, since a lot of you probably wanted to do medicine maybe the first time when you're 18 and you're doing a subject allied to medicine now instead, wanting to apply at graduate level, you're maybe a crammer like I was. I wasn't super motivated about what I was studying, and therefore I didn't put in the hours that I should have done. And I think many of you might be in a similar situation, and I think that's fine. You can make that transition, just as long as you accept that at some point things are going to have to change. So what it's basically meant for me is a lot more work outside of timetabled study hours, primarily just going over lectures, reading around the subject to broaden my knowledge and knowledge of techniques, things like that, particularly surgical stuff because I'm really interested in anatomy. And I use Anki as well, a flashcard app, a lot, which really deserves its own video for the amount that I use it. There's no time in a medical degree, although that said, I am talking about an accelerated medical degree, to revisit material in class. Once we've covered something in class, that's it, it's gone. It's up to you to maintain your knowledge of it. And so it's all about continuous revision, just a little bit here, a little bit there, just challenging yourself with questions, trying to predict what might come up, just continuous revision. And there are a few differences, obviously, like I've touched on. The first one being that at least at Warwick, we're all graduates. And so on this medical programme, we, in theory, know how we study best. So I like flashcards, but I wasn't employing them in the correct way before. I was doing them all at once, whereas it should be little and often. And the other part, like I've said, is that we're all motivated to actually do well at this subject. We want to be good doctors, we want to qualify, we want to be the best clinicians that we can be. And so therefore you naturally do a lot more reading in the areas that interest you, and that's great. It's a really, really good feeling. So I don't want to go too much further with that. I hope that that sums up the main difference, at least in terms of the academics. The key thing with medicine as opposed to a normal science subject is that it's breadth rather than depth, and that takes a different approach to get down properly, I think. And with grad entry medicine specifically, it's probably a lot more work than you've been used to doing before, but genuinely don't be worried about that, because if you were anything like me, not the best, at what you were doing because you wanted to do medicine, then when you get here, your passion will come out. It's fine, and you get used to it. You want to do it. And it's taken me, I'm 2 blocks in, that's nearly 3 months into the course, to kind of sort myself out and comfortably work out what level I need to be working at. But now that I'm there, well, it's still a work in progress, but I'm closer to my optimum than I was when I started, let's put it that way. But I just really want to stress that it's not something to be worried about. So I hope that's been useful, guys. Please remember to hit that like button for me, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like this. I actually really enjoy doing these Q&A videos because they're very focused. So if you've got a specific question that you'd like answering here on the channel, just drop me a comment on one of the videos or let me know through the contact form on my website, postgradmedic.com. I'll get to it as quickly as I can, and then the answer will be out there, at least from my perspective, and a lot of people should hopefully find it useful. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye for now.